So, having lived on this earth for as long as we have, it should be obvious to us all that humans have primal urges, just like every other organism on the planet. Food is one, sex and reproduction is another. And our society knows it. We all understand that our culture is absolutely crazy about sex. Take all of the sexual references used in advertisements. Between cars, clothing, and fragrances, everyone knows sex sells because it's such a huge influence in our lives. And wouldn't life suck without it? However, from the perspective of evolutionary theory, it seems as though sexual reproduction isn't the most efficient way of reproducing. Many organisms, such as bacteria and fungi, reproduce asexually. This eliminates the need to find a mate and is much more energy efficient, but essentially creates an exact copy of the mother organism. Can you imagine if humans reproduce this way? How strange would that be? But if asexual reproduction is better, the big question is, why does sexual reproduction even exist? Let's try to answer that question by first explaining the Red Queen's hypothesis. The phenomenon proposes that organisms with our environment must persistently adapt and evolve to survive. Evolving organisms are constantly competing against other organisms, both of which are constantly evolving.
The hypothesis came from a book called Through the Looking Glass, involving two main characters, Alice and the Red Queen. The Red Queen is viewed as the antagonist within the story, and she is the queen for the side opposing Alice. The hypothesis focuses on the Red Queen's race, where both her and Alice continue to run but remain in the same spot. It takes all the running you could do to keep in the same place, so we're basically working our asses off trying to evolve, and when we do, we're still in the same exact spot we started in because we're still competing. Let's try to drop some science on you now. Asexually reproducing organisms seems to have an advantage over sexually reproducing organisms, considering the goal of spreading one's genes basically all over the place. Organisms who are asexual can pass on their genes much faster than sexually reproducing organisms and do not need to invest time and energy in finding a mate. Asexual organisms are passing only their genes onto the next generation of offspring, giving its offspring 100% of their successful genetic makeup.
When organisms reproduce sexually, half of the genes given to the next generation are from one parent, and the other half are from the other parent. This could possibly harm the offspring's fitness, since it may lose certain genetic traits that made each of its parents successful. However, doesn't this essentially go both ways? An asexual organism could lack in fitness and continue to produce organisms with this exact same deficiency. Sucks for them. We, the sexually reproducing organisms, end up on top, since genetic variation between two different organisms proves to be a beneficial trait within our constantly evolving environment. This sexual variation seems to provide an advantage over asexual organisms that have very little variation to give to their offspring. Two researchers at Rutgers University conducted a study to try and test the Red Queen hypothesis. A fish in Mexico called the top minnow has the capability of reproducing sexually as well as asexually. It is constantly under attack by a parasitic worm that causes black spot disease. Both researchers found that the asexually reproducing top minnows were harboring many more parasitic worms compared to those that produced sexually. This fit the Red Queen's hypothesis. The sexually reproducing top minnows could produce new defenses faster through variation and recombination than the asexually reproducing fish.
To sum it all up, the Red Queen's hypothesis proposes that all organisms, whether asexual or sexual, must constantly adapt and evolve to just simply survive against an ever-competitive world. It was previously assumed that asexually reproducing organisms had an advantage over sexually reproducing organisms for their ability to quickly and easily spread their genes.
However, we can conclude that there is an advantage reproducing sexually because of the variation and recombination of genes given to future generations of offspring. The study conducted in Mexico on the top minnow fish proved the Red Queen's hypothesis in that the asexually reproducing fish had more parasitic worms than the sexually reproducing fish. So folks, the big point of this video is, thank God for sex.